Hello everyone, I am Bob Lingle of Off the Beaten Path Bookstore in Lakewood, New York, and this is the Weaponized Literacy Podcast. Over the past year, I've been fortunate to have the opportunity to speak with investigative reporters, social activists, astrophysicists, philosophers, military veterans, and just plain old writers. We discuss life, death, and all of the things that happen in between. Our goal is to use the power of the written word to create a better understanding of the world around us and the people that live in it. We do this by reading with purpose, and we invite you to join in our effort to weaponize literacy. Hello everyone, thank you for joining us tonight. Our guest tonight is the author of The Order of Oddfish, a young adult novel published by Delacorte in 2008. He is also the founder and director of the 92nd Newbery Film Festival, an annual nationwide contest in which kid filmmakers make 90-second videos about Newbery-winning books. Before becoming a writer, he was a software engineer and has a degree in physics and philosophy. Dare to Know is his first adult novel. Ladies and gentlemen, James Kennedy. Thanks for joining us tonight, James.
Thank you so much for having me here, Bob. I'm really happy. I love your background. The Christmas tree, the bookstore looks very cozy.
Thank you. I have changed the background a few times during these events, and I'm like, you know what? This is the last virtual author event of the year that we're doing. So we're close enough to the holidays that we're going with the holiday backdrop.
I'm going with a backdrop that I hope suggests like the Black Lodge from Twin Peaks.
Okay. I got a very strong theater vibe from it. Like you were I wanted to thank you, everyone who's watching, as well as Quirk Books. You're the second author that we've interviewed from Quirk Books where we have gone around Quirk Books to set up the interview. So I love Quirk Books, and I also love working around them to obtain their authors.
Wait, who is the other author?
Andrew Schaefer.
Awesome. Fantastic.
Yeah. There was a fun little chat. We were talking about, it wasn't a Quirk book title, but we were talking about the Obama-Biden murder mysteries and Secret Santa, but it was after his book of poetry had come out, and that was through, I don't know if it was self-published or just a smaller press.
Got it.
But can you give us a spoiler-free synopsis of Dare to Know?
Absolutely. So, Dare to Know is this book. It's a speculative thriller, and it's set in a world that's pretty much like our own, except that there's this company that was like a startup in the 90s, also called Dare to Know, that can sell you the precise time and date of your death. It was a kind of high-flying startup in the 90s. You used to have to pay millions of dollars to find out when you're going to die, but now it's kind of a down-market product that kind of almost anybody can know for a couple $1,000. Our main character is a salesman who's been in Dare to Know from the beginning, and his fortunes have kind of fallen lately. He's a bit of a down on his luck salesman. And there's just one rule in Dare to Know. If you're a salesman, you can't look up your own death date. But after a bunch of things go wrong for him, after a near car crash, he's sitting alone in his car. He decides to look up his own death date, and he finds out that he had died 23 minutes ago. And so the question is, why does this weird math fail only for him? And that sets off a quest for him to figure out why that is the case through his own memories and across America. And yeah, that's the premise.
And the story is told somewhat non-linear. Like there's a lot of going back in time to different points in the protagonist's life. What was the writing process while you were trying to balance that out?
That's a really good question. So just like with my first book, this book started out as a short story. It was just like a 20,000 word short story. And I kind of had all the things in place, but I did not really have anything about his life. And it was kind of all in the present day. And then I really liked the short story, but there was something missing to it, like some kind of emotional heft that I wanted to give. And so I started to think, who is this guy? And I started making it. And then what does it mean to know the time of your death and to find out in a way you're kind of already dead? And I think, well, that becomes a reckoning with your life. You're like all the good and the bad that you've done, and trying to figure out. At a certain point, you wake up and you're like, what kind of person have I become? And I thought that is, like the science fiction premise of like, what if you can know the time of your death, kind of opens the way for these deeper kind of ideas. Kind of like I really love the films of Charlie Kaufman. like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, where like there's a technology that can, erase a memory that you don't like, but that kind of just opens up a broader emotional idea of like, well, what memories would you erase and how would it affect you? Or being John Malkovich, like what does it mean to be in the mind of a famous person? And so then I started to think, well, what if I also made it beyond just about this guy, but also knowing the time and date of your own death, but knowing the time and date of like the death of the society that you're in or the universe that you're in, and kind of expanding it broader. And so the more I kind of expanded the questions or deepened the questions, the more it allowed me to kind of go back and fill out these uh, um, kind of flashbacks, but also gave me a kind of glue to stitch them all together and keep bringing them back to the main story in a way that, yeah, it is nonlinear, but I think does still grab you and pull you along.
And you have a background in philosophy, so I imagine that you leaned on that, developing the ideas behind it.
Yeah, physics and philosophy. So I was a double major in those, and one of the things that is really interesting about when you study the history of science is that there's a lot of weirdos and cranks who are involved in it. Like Newton spent a lot of his time, like 90% of his writing is about alchemy or biblical geometry and things like that. Or like even modern scientists like Wolfgang Pauli, one of the founders of quantum theory, was a big Jungian, and he wrote a book about the occult. And so I thought there's a lot of, like, I wanted to explore this kind of odd permeability between modern science and the occult, and then create this thing, this special mathematics, in which you could tell the time and date of your death. But it couldn't be a normal mathematics, and I didn't want it to just be, oh, you find out the time and date of your death by, you just turn on your app and you find out about it. I wanted to make it more interesting. And so I remember that scene from Blade Runner, the very first scene, the Voight-Kampff test, in which one guy is asking another guy a bunch of questions to figure out if the guy is like a robot or not. And I thought I want to do something like that. So I kind of created this mathematics that depends on this kind of intimate interview that you do with somebody that's kind of surreal. But it's like subjective math that a computer can't do. And so you have to be constantly consulting these books and doing the calculation on your own. And you have to make up your own weird metaphors to understand the math. And so I guess my training in the physics and philosophy, both of those, like gave me enough ideas or kind of grounding to kind of try to make something. Well, maybe it's not totally plausible, but it's plausible when you're reading the book, hopefully.
Well, it reminded me, there's a book that I read in grad school called The Culture Code. And I am not remembering the guy's last name. It's over there, but believe it. He goes through and he tries to find the code behind different companies or different brands, and he goes through like these several hour-long interviews of asking the people and like finding that foundational truth of what that one thing is about the brand that makes it the brand. And with you, it's When You'll Die.
Yeah, I think once you have like a good enough central idea, then I think a lot of other things will start magnetizing to it, and then it's just a question of like kind of letting them come and not forcing it. Like since it was about this kind of technology, obviously it was gonna be a startup, and I spent a lot of years in like the programming culture, and I kind of watched as it too kind of went from this kind of optimistic, like we can change the world kind of feeling, to now it's kind of degenerated into this more kind of cursed zone for grifters and like people making this surveillance technology or algorithms just to mine the most intimate details of your lives, just to sell you ads and things like that. And so it doesn't feel as giddy and optimistic as it did in 1997 or even 2007. And so I kind of wanted to chart that kind of cultural change as well, but do it through this technology.
Great. I am always trying to work on a writing project, and we frequently have people that watch these that are aspiring writers or newer writers. So I always like to talk about the process. You said that it started out as a short story initially. What was kind of the timeline of how long did you sit on that short story, and what was the process of working it out into a full length? You went into it a little bit, but
yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
So a lot of these things like start with an idea that isn't what like it eventually becomes. Like famously, when C.S. Lewis had the idea for The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, he it was like his idea was like he had a vision of like a fawn in the snow with an umbrella and a parcel. and that was it. And he started writing off of that. He did not say, I'm going to write a 7-part Christian allegory with a lion as Jesus. That all came out through who he was. It's on my brain right now because I'm just finishing reading the whole series to my daughters again. And we're on the last battle, which is a truly weird book. And I love the whole series, but and so, like, I don't know, about 20 years ago or so, I had this idea of, like, I wanted to write a story about a salesman of an unlikely or weird product, and he was down on his luck. And then I just had that in my mind for a long time, and I didn't do anything with it. And actually, after that was when I wrote The Order of Odd Fish and a bunch of other things. And then I kind of came back to it, and I was just kind of hanging out on the playground watching my daughters play, and it just kind of came to me out of nowhere. Well, what if the technology was knowing the exact time and date of your death? And I think the internet was starting to feel a little gross at that time, like that change. Like there was a time in like 2008 in which, like, or around then, like, I just felt like the internet was this place of, like, exploration and discovery, and people were, like, bringing all their weird hobbies out and say, like, look what I made. Look at this. Pouring all this creativity for free and sharing it with people in this open-hearted way. But then, like, at a certain point after that, maybe with social media, things started to feel a little bit bad for me. And then, especially when I found out, or the more you learned about how, all the intimate details of your life are being shoveled into this algorithm, this total surveillance, and just used for the most banal things. And so I thought, well, what if you could take the most maybe sublime thing about your life, which would be the moment of your death, and just turn that into another meaningless data point. And so that kind of got it going. And then once I was on that, a lot of ideas could gravitate towards that, like startup culture, or things about my own life since I was a computer programmer, or and also ideas of, like, occult and its relationship to science, and what happens when you die.
Mhm. What was the kind of psychological toll on you of so intimately going into the aspect of knowing when you'll die?
I tried it out for myself because there is a weird website from like 2006 that is still up. I was promoting Dare to Know with some librarians a couple weeks ago, and one of them said, "Did you know there's already a website that does this? If you go to deathclock.com and you put in, like, your age and, like, I don't know, your weight and a couple other things about you, it spits out the exact date that you will die." And I think it said to me, I'm going to die like December 17th, 2046. And so now I have my date. That's all I got. That's all. And the thing is, like, once it's made, like, specific, you do, like, start to think much more clearly about, oh yeah, I'm not going to live forever, even though I probably won't die on that date. It
Mhm.
is within a reasonable range. And so, like, wow, I only have that many decades left. What am I going to do? What's going to happen? It concentrates the mind. But it also, in the book, since it's a real technology and not just a joke, it kind of, like, brings up all these ideas of free will. Like, well, if you know exact date that you're going to die, then why don't you just, like, put a gun to your head and fire it and see what happens? And then in this world, people discover all these uncomfortable things about free will if they try to defy the algorithm, because, no matter what you do, that it's accurate in the end.
Um, it just occurred to me that with you we're doing an event tomorrow, but I won't be conducting the interview. So this is the last one for the year. Our first event for virtual author event for this year was with Ray Robertson, who wrote How to Die,
Oh, wow.
a book about being alive. So I was not intentional, but really appropriate bookends there. For
That's
anyone that,
fantastic.
yeah. For anyone that is watching on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, if you do have any questions or comments, you can use the comment feature there, and we'll incorporate those in as we can. So as you're fleshing it out, I noticed in the acknowledgments you were talking about the change in agencies that you had. Can you, I don't know how much you want to get into
I'll
that. You put
totally
in
get
the
into it. Oh my gosh.
acknowledgments.
Oh, I love to talk about this kind of stuff because authors are not frank about this kind of thing at all, and so we should be. So my first book came out, The Order of Odd Fish, and it's a, like, YA fantasy. And I wrote it. It's my first book, and I wrote it in a very haphazard, kind of chaotic, organic, and fun way. I was having a ball the entire time I was writing it. And then, like, I tried to, get an agent. And of course, when you're getting your first agent, it's impossible. You're sending out tons of query letters. I got like about 100 rejections back. And then I finally got an agent, and she was a great agent, like a top agent, and she sold it, and I was very happy. And then like she kind of like I kind of got uh, um like she had a protege who like became my new agent, and then she went off and did other projects. And this protege, the stuff I was giving her, she didn't like. And then finally, she was just like, you know what? I don't think I'm the right agent for you, which is fine. Like nobody should have to, try to sell something that they don't believe in. But then I
Mhm.
was back to square one, with all of my confidence like knocked out of me. Because I think the stuff I was writing was kind of more adult, and I did not realize I was becoming an adult author. And so, and and another thing is when I wrote Oddfish, it was a very chaotic process. But with the second book, I was like, okay, now I'm a professional author. So I got to act like one. So I'm going to read these books about like story structure, and I'm
Mhm.
going to be the kind of person who kind of plans everything out and makes it correct and marketable. I'm not going to be so weird this time. And my creativity dried up, or the stuff that I was writing was not marketable, or like anything that I got excited about was just like, well, this will never sell. And then I would like strangle the idea in the crib. And then I just and then the next thing that happened is that my wife and I had two kids. And that was a
Mhm.
very destabilizing jolt for my creativity. Not bad, but destabilizing. My writing became even weirder and more kind of unfinishable and stuff like that. And so then I kind of did the worst thing of all. I was just like, well then, and I was trying to frantically to get a new agent. I was like, I'm back to square one, sending out these query letters, but that wasn't going anywhere because I think maybe the stuff I was trying out was not that good. And so I was like, what am I going to do? And so I thought I did the worst thing possible, which is isolate myself. I spent so I'm just going to sit on my butt and grind something out that's great. But of course, writing late at night and the kids screaming in the other room, like
Mhm.
I was just stripping the screws off and going nowhere. And so then I kind of, to get out of my head, and I don't know if I didn't do this intentionally, it just kind of happened. I started doing creative things that were just fun. So I started up this film festival that I do called the 92nd Newbery Film Festival, and like kids make movies that tell the whole story of a Newbery winning book in about 90 seconds. I started that about 10 years ago, and um, and and it's really fun. Like kids make these movies, and sometimes they're very surprising, like Charlotte's Web, but it's done in the style of a horror movie, or which is great because the first line of Charlotte's Web is like, "Where's Papa going with that axe?" It's a terrifying book in many
Mhm.
ways. And then I got all these videos, and it kind of the film festival spread from just like New York and Chicago and Portland my first year to like 14 cities by our final year or by last year. And so I was like, but doing that, I would like put on these camps on movie making, but I didn't know how to make any movies.
Mhm.
But I just like threw myself into it with kids and did this kind of no or low stakes creativity, not with myself, but with other people. And I kind of got the joy of creating back. And then people ask me, well, why don't you teach some classes on writing? I was like, what do I know about writing? I can't write anymore. But I was taught like these classes for like gifted kids at Northwestern University, this kind of summer camp, and that like just being in touch with these like kids who are like eighth or ninth grade who were just writing for the joy of it, like kind of
Mhm.
sparked my joy of writing again. And then I kind of started doing this podcast with my friend Matt Bird, who's kind of a writing guru, called The Secrets of Story. He has a book called The Secrets of Story. And I disagree with a lot of his writing advice, but just hanging out with him and discussing writing and how to do it and realizing I'm not analytical like him, I'm more creative and chaotic, made me try realize, oh, this is the kind of writer that I am. And so then Dare to Know started just coming out very quickly. I wrote it much more quickly than Oddfish. And when I finished writing, I was like, well, that'll never sell. But then I finally got an agent who was interested in something else I did. And he said, well, I like this, but I don't think I can go out with it yet. What else you got? I said, well, I've got this other thing. He's like, not that either. What else you got? And I was like, well, I do have this thing, Dare to Know, but I don't think you're going to like it. And he said, oh, I can sell this. And so I was like, all right, so I don't know how to sell anything, and I don't know what the market wants. But I'm glad that he took a chance on me, and that Quirk Books, who is my dream publisher, took a
Mhm.
chance on me. They all their books are so beautiful. Like the graphic design is great. I'm so happy with my editor. Like whenever I was like, I don't know, this might be a little too weird, she was like, make it weirder. Like or she didn't like, I never felt like she pulled me back or made me somebody that I wasn't. And all of her suggestions were great. So that was it. But it kind of took a long, circuitous path. And I think maybe the thing is, you can't or at least I can't resist taking the long circuitous path. The longer I resist it, the more I try to say, oh, I'm just going to do everything straightforward. It's not going to work. And I just have to like let that circuitous path happen and let what comes out come out, because any other way, nothing will come out and nothing will happen.
I've been in some form of the book industry for about a decade now. I was at Barnes & Noble. I managed a couple college bookstores with Follett, and then I've owned this store for almost 4 years now. And it wasn't until like this past year of doing these virtual author events and just kind of connecting with different publishers that I started to see just some of the trends with publishers, and not even just trend, but like the personality that a publisher has. We've done a lot of events with this smaller publisher out of Philadelphia called Lanternfish Press, and I've interviewed, I don't even know how many of their authors, and they all kind of have this very different people, but similar sort of vibe. And Quirk Books, it was a couple years ago, or it was when Andrew Schaefer's first Obama-Biden book came out.
Yeah.
I saw that. And then I just started noticing like all of these other books, because every other month we get a box from the American Booksellers Association of advanced reader copies. And I noticed that I'm like, I keep picking up Quirk Books. I'm like, and I just noticed it after. I'm like, I love this publisher. So I think I met Nicole from the marketing department before the world shut down at a conference in Baltimore last year.
But
yeah,
she's been great too.
Yeah, I'm glad that you found your home there. Do you
at long last?
It's always the worst question to ask an author unless they do have something in the works. But do you have another project that you're working on?
Oh yeah, I think my next book is going to come out on Quirk in 2023. Okay. It's called Bride of the Tornado, and it's something that I've been working on for a long time. And in fact, I had finished a version of it before I even started Dare to Know. But I think there are a lot of things I just couldn't figure out about it, and then I recently kind of figured them out, and everything kind of clicked into place. And now it's like a different and much better book. And when I showed it to people at Quirk, they're like, "Oh yeah, this will be great." And so I felt really good about it. So that will be at least my next 2 books will be with Quirk. Great. And I'm very happy about it. And so that means that I have time to work on the third thing. And so I'm it's that I realized that, oh well, I have to just embrace an idea when it comes to me, and I can't just be careful about it. And so, and I think like maybe that's why I write books. Like if you write for TV, and I love TV, but TV is by its nature like very formulaic writing, and it has to, and you have to also get a lot of other people to agree with you that it's worth doing. You know, like a writing staff and a cinematographer or whatever. But the thing that books have for sale is that one madman can make one, and be helped out by other madmen along the way. But like, in the end, like just one person making the decision. So you have to kind of embrace that and do something that is weirder than what you'll find on TV or in the movies. And so it's the next thing I'm writing is it's kind of about half done. It's like, part of it happens like modern times, and then it kind of goes back to the 60s, and then it like jumps forward to 10,000 years in the future. It's kind of like a mythological kind of history of computing. It's hard to explain. I don't really have an elevator pitch for it yet.
Yeah. You talked about your kids a couple of times. How old are your daughters?
10 and 12.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, go on.
They're potentially less. I have 7, 5, and 1.
Oh, awesome.
How is it trying to balance a writing schedule with having kids around?
It's so hilarious, because before I had kids, like I would just like every night, like I would just go to the coffee house and just like write, and it was just like this luxurious, and I just like took all the time. Like, I was one of those people just sitting there with 1 cup of coffee for like 5 hours, just like scroll away. And then I realized that you just don't have that luxury anymore, and you just have to find the time to write whenever you can. You can't be precious anymore, and just like if you've got 15 minutes. And the thing is, the quality, it doesn't matter like how you feel about it when you write it. Once the words are on the page, it doesn't matter how comfortable you were when you wrote it. It doesn't matter even if you felt it was good when you wrote it, because when you look at it later, whether it was good or bad kind of doesn't depend on whether or not you thought it was good or bad when you were writing it. like sometimes you can really surprise yourself, because when you look at it the next day, it's as if a stranger wrote it, and you can look at it a little more objectively. And
Mhm.
so I just realized, oh, you just have to put the words on paper however you can. And then like there's just like there's the two parts of your creativity. There's like one part, like the part that just puts words out, and it has just like some weird mouth that's like sitting on your shoulder, just shrieking nonsense all the time. And you just like write that nonsense down. And then there's another part of you that is an editor, and you have to like turn that off when the mouth is shrieking and just let it shriek. And then when you let the mouth be quiet, and then you turn on the editor and you let it make sense of what it shrieked. But I think those two have to be kept separate. And if like this thing is shrieking, this thing's trying to shut it up, then
Mhm.
you'll be stymied.
That's something that I always struggle with, of going through a writing project and just constantly self-editing as I'm trying to just put words on paper. So whenever I'm trying to write something, I always at the top put words on paper.
I do the same thing. One of the things that I do is if I'm trying to just like, okay, I'm just going to rough this out, I won't do it in Microsoft Word, which is where I write most of it. I open
Mhm.
up Notepad, because like, oh
Okay.
well, Notepad is just for trash, you know. And then also I can't even do italics in this thing. And then also I enjoy longhand. My first book I wrote mostly in longhand, and then I would write out a clean copy in longhand, and then I would type it in, and that would force you to re-edit it every step. Of course, I don't have time for that anymore. And
Mhm.
with Dare to Know is one of the first things that I just went. I typed a lot of it straight into Word and didn't look back because I didn't have the time. But also, it's a different vibe than The Order of Odd Fish. It was kind of more urgent and modern and raw, and so that kind of mode of composition was fine.
I don't know if it's Stephen King or Chuck Palahniuk, possibly both, that they do all of their first drafts handwritten, and it drives their editor nuts.
I would never submit anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm too much of
If
a
it's
control
Stephen
freak.
King, he can get away with it.
Yeah, yeah. But I wouldn't want to, is what I'm saying. Like I'm too much of a control freak to, once before I give something to someone, like I'm not the kind of person who would give an unfinished thing to somebody. Like, oh, here's
Mhm.
the first 3 chapters of what I did. What do you think? What should I do so far? Because I think that would overly affect where I'm going with it, or I have to really kind of resist the temptation to do that. Because once you finish writing something you like, you think, oh, even though I'm not done with it yet, I've still got like half of it left to write. I want some kind of validation, But maybe
Mhm.
as soon as you get that validation, that's you're like, well, I got my validation. I'll stop writing now.
Yeah. um, on that note of things interfering with the process, are you more of a planner or a pantser in terms of writing? Are you do you know where the story's going, or are you just writing and seeing where it takes you?
I think it's a combination. I'll write kind of just out of the blue what they call a pantser, and then I kind of develop an outline, and then I'll write another scene, and that will change the outline, and I'll write a new outline, and I'll write another scene, and that will change the outline. And then like maybe I'll have the whole thing written, and then I'll realize, oh, I want to put this scene back in there. Well, how do I make that flow? And so then everything has to kind of move around. We have to find the kind of ingenious ways to make it flow. And that kind of problem solving is very fun, and I like the big challenge of writing Dare to Know is like there's a couple very various flashbacks to various times of the main character's life, and then flashing back to the time we're at now. And how do you manage all of that and make it flow and make it make sense?
Hmm.
To like make it clear the very first sentence of the review section. Oh, we're in this time, and also kind of set up the implied rules like, okay, we're not going to go too crazy with every time this guy's like, there's going to be 2 or 3 times, like broad times we keep returning to.
Okay. I don't know. I really want to talk about this, and I didn't have a good segue into it, so I'll just dive right into it. And I don't know how to pronounce the word cahokia.
Hokia, yeah.
All right. That a lot of it could be spoilers for the book, but if you can kind of give some background into that and how you wanted to incorporate and why you wanted to incorporate cahokia into it.
Yes. So, for those who don't know about it, from about like 1100 or 1050 to 1400, right outside of what is now St. Louis, there was a Native American city called, well, we don't know what it was called. There is no the written records that remain, and but now it is kind of dubbed Cahokia, and but it was a society that flourished and then completely vanished between like 1100 and 1400 before any Europeans came around. And it's a very mysterious place. It was like at its height, it was like 20,000, 30,000 people, which is like more than London or Paris were at the time. And it they only really started discovering the stuff. I mean, they always knew that there were like hills outside of St. Louis, but for a long time, people say, oh, because there's like these gigantic mounds that were made in this place. And they're finding a lot of like arrowheads and things like that there. It was like, oh, nobody really cared. Or like people were just actively destroying these remnants of this amazing Native American civilization. And but when in the 50s, when Eisenhower's highway acts were being passed, there was a proviso or whatever in there that said they had to do archaeological digs on whatever place a highway is going to go through. And so that was what gave the funding and the motivation to dig up this place. And there was this whole amazing city there. And so a lot of architecture, I mean, a lot of archaeology was done there. And they kind of made it into a World Heritage site. There were like houses all over the place. They kind of tore down the houses and like made it into a park. And in particular, there's one beautiful like 100-foot tall earth mound they call Monk's Mound. It's a very mysterious place. And I was kind of angry when I found out about it in my 30s because I had never heard of this before. And you hear about the Aztecs or the Mayans, and you even in elementary school, you hear about the Greeks and the Romans, but I did not know about this, like interesting urban center that was essentially right in my backyard. I grew up in Michigan. So it was just like a not that long, car ride away. And so I was interested in this, especially this kind of idea that it just completely, utterly vanished. And this is like and the reason it's called Cahokia is the Cahokia tribe was a Native American tribe that was in the area when like the missionaries or the explorers, Europeans came through. They said, what do you call a city? Like, we don't know. And so they just named it after the tribe they happened to be talking to. The idea of the city, it had been around longer than our United States has been around, and now it's completely forgotten. And it's kind of like a history that has been overwritten, like a lot of Native American history, and like even like in the way that people talk about it now, it's like, oh, it's as if they're vanished people. They're not vanished. They're like right here with us. They're people, but I wanted to get this feeling of impermanence and this overwriting of history, because what our main character in Dare to Know is doing is kind of overwriting his own personal history, or kind of indulging for this like nostalgia for it. And at the same time, like in this country, we kind of overwrite history or we obliterate it in order for various reasons, like racist, economic, whatnot. And so I was thinking, well, our society isn't going to be forever, and one day we are going to be the Cahokians. And so since this is about the life and death of one man, and that knowing the exact day he was going to die, I wanted to be about kind of the life and death of the society that we're in, and also the kind of life and death of the universe. And so it's kind of like, so as it is below, so it is above. And so I learned a lot about Cahokia, especially from an archaeologist named Timothy Pawcatuck. Cahokia, ancient America's great city on the Mississippi. Might be a good 1-2 punch to buy with Dare to Know. Okay. And he also wrote a more scholarly thing when he got a lot of scholars to contribute to, called Medieval Mississippians, the Cahokian World, which is edited by Timothy Pawcatuck. And then there was a lot of more modern archaeology that I was reading up articles on the internet. It just blew my mind that I did not know about this until my 30s. And it like so much of Native American history kind of obliterated. And so I wanted to include that in the story because it seemed very germane to the story, and germane to our lives, and knowing the land that we stand on, and understanding the future that awaits for us. Because like there's 1,000 years from now, when like the cockroach men have taken over, and they dig up, your bones and my bones, Bob, and they say, what were these people? Yeah, we are the cockroach men.
I almost feel like, all right, we'll leave it at that. I always try, when I re-edit this into the podcast, I try to find an interesting line from the interview to lead off before the intro, and I think I found
Oh,
it.
great. Let's see if we can top it. You've given me a challenge.
That's the bar right now. Uh, so, who are some of your writing influences? Some of your favorite authors?
I love to talk about this. Okay, so one of the big influences for this book in particular is Ted Chiang.
Okay.
He is for those who don't know, he's a short story writer. He lives in the Pacific Northwest. He's like a kind of, by day, I believe he's like a software writer. But he wrote the book of short stories that has a short story in it called The Story of Your Life, which was made into the movie Arrival.
Mm-hmm.
And he does a great thing. Every single one of his stories has one really tight idea. And then he kind of very logically kind of spins that idea out and finds all the various kind of things that could mean. And so I love all of his short stories, and he is a true model. And he's one of those people who just only writes perfectly, like so I think he only has like tons of short stories, but every one of them is a gem. And then another influence is Philip K. Dick, because he also has like a wild idea. So Philip K. Dick, like do Android's Dream of Electric Sheep, which is made into Blazer, or like Minority Report. He also has, wild ideas, but then he is also just a wild and undisciplined writer. Well, unlike Ted Chiang, which every sentence feels like it was kind of crafted by Diamond. And I kind of wanted to tap in a little more of the wild Philip K. Dick energy, which might not be perfect sentence by sentence, but gets
Mm-hmm.
across some kind of urgent rush to it. Other people who kind of to influence me, like I really like growing up, I really loved like Isaac Asimov and
Mm-hmm.
Ray Bradbury. Like Isaac Asimov, he was another person like not his characters aren't much, but his ideas are fantastic. And Ray Bradbury has this kind of yearning, like nostalgic feeling to him that I wanted to give with this too. And but I also wanted to like there's a book by I don't know how you say his last name, Daniel Kevich or something. He wrote House of Leaves.
Okay.
Um, oh God, my next door neighbor, who this is her favorite author. She's gonna kill me when I, but like it's a very kind of fever dream of a book, kind of feeling like a Lynch movie. And I think maybe that's what I wanted to write a book that felt like Twin Peaks or felt like Mulholland Drive, felt like something that David Lynch would write, in which like maybe not everything of it makes total sense when you're reading it, but feel it does sense this level. You just haven't figured it out yet, and maybe the fact that you can't quite touch the meaning means it will stay with you longer. Like I've said this in other contexts, but I will think about the end of Mulholland Drive or the end of Twin Peaks until the day I die. And I wanted, or like the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey, like endings that are kind of cryptic, but you do feel that they mean something. If you spent enough time with it, it will slowly kind of reveal itself to you. And that's the kind of ending that I wanted to write.
I felt like I was prepped for reading your book because I read Rabbits by Terry Miles.
Oh, it's a great book. I love that book.
Yeah. I read it a couple books before reading Dare to Know.
Yeah.
So like it has that similar mind melting. Where what is happening? Where is this going? So I was ready for it. And then when I was talking to people about, because Rabbits came out first, and then I'm like,
Yeah.
if you like this, just wait.
Yeah,
But
Rabbits also has the idea of like the kind of the haunted video games to it,
yes,
which I like. Any technology, it's like a little old, like about 20 years old, starts to become spooky, and I think definitely like he tapped into that, and I guess we both happen to tap in something similar at the same time.
and I wanted to talk. You had referenced like the thick skin of all of the rejection letters going in. Once a book is out in the world,
Yes.
then it becomes a whole nother animal. And because I read your book, I reviewed it, and it was the first time that any of my reviews have been attached to a book that has made the Indie Next flyer. So I have just
Thank you.
I feel like I have this connection to the book where I want to know what's going on with it. And I keep you are very engaging on Goodreads
Uh-huh.
for the good and the bad, and
Yeah.
I end up getting alerts when I'm like, oh, James Kennedy has an update on Goodreads. So I read through, and just the interactions that you have with people that like the book, but also people that don't like the book.
Yes, yes. Oh, I mean, okay, this book is not for everyone, and
Mhm.
maybe like Nicole at Quirk doesn't want me to say that, but
Yeah.
it's I think if I think that I it's very easy for me to get bored reading a book. And I read a lot of books all the time, but sometimes I just see I know exactly where this is going. And just like people, even just like down to like people coming and going from rooms, picking up glasses of water and drinking them. She quirked her eyebrow, just like all like the weird little like somebody giving a wry grin of just like all like the cliches that you read again and again, especially the cliches that are of our era,
Mhm.
And so I was like, I want to write something that doesn't feel like anything that I'm reading right now. And I thought, well, what are I reading right now? I'm not reading. What I wanted to do is something that was like kind of like a science fiction, like kind of speculative thriller thing. But I also wanted to be kind of do some of the things that autofiction does, which is like this kind of unsparing confession.
Mhm.
So something, and so I was like, well, so I'm gonna do things that are gonna make my main character unlikable. He's going to be, or somebody who is like, some people might think this guy's an asshole. And I said, well, how can I make that? Well, I'll take a lot of things about myself that are like the most discreditable things, or things that are kind of photo negative of how I would act, and put them in and make this person I make telling, even though he's unlikable, because he has something to confess. Like the kind of con- realization he comes to at one of the like emotional high points of the book. He's like, when did I become such an asshole? And I think that's a feeling that we all have at some point in our lives. Like, how did I become this person? And I
Mhm.
if it's a book about somebody who knows exactly when they're going to die and they feel fine about the life that they've lived, that's not much of a book. Like even Jimmy Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life did not like the way life was going, and so I tried to, and I love books with kind of quote unquote unlikable main characters. Like I love Notes from Underground. The guy's a self-pitying jerk, or a fan's notes. I love that book, and there's a lot of books in which you have like a character that's hard like, but people don't. Some people don't like that, and they
Mhm.
want like, and they almost seem to think that if an author writes an unlikable or a bad person, then you've created a bad person and set them out free in the world to run around and do bad things. That's not the case, and I'm lucky that my editor kind of also feels this way. She's like, I read this tweet thread from her recently. She was like, "Yeah, I get a lot of submissions. It just seems that people are so anxious to be thought of as good, that they, the author, are good, and that their characters are good. Or if the characters are bad, I'm very carefully signaling to the reader, look, you and I both know that they're bad, right? We're both good." And I kind of didn't want to give the reader that out. I'm going to put you right in this guy who, might make you feel uncomfortable because maybe you should feel uncomfortable, or
Mhm.
maybe feeling comfortable is part of the artistic experience. So that was one of the things I think people complained about. Like, I don't like this guy. And another thing is like, I'm confused, which is fine. Not everybody's going to engage with a book as deeply as one would want, or as much detail, and that's fine too. Not everybody likes David Lynch either, and I'm cool with it. He makes rent.
Yeah. um, and I feel like we're in this. I'm in so many different groups with booksellers, and just conversations around books, and we're in just a weird, uncomfortable place where people are just want everything to be perfect in terms of who is telling the story and how is it being
Mm-hmm.
told. Like there was one person who was taking issue with Stephen King's newest book, Billy Summers,
Yeah.
and like, oh, Stephen King is really like fat shaming a lot of people in this book. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
Stephen King's not fat shaming anyone in this book. Billy Summers is. Billy Summers is kind of a jerk.
Exactly.
Like there,
Yeah.
at some point
I
we lost the separation.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's 'cause everybody is so anxious. Like, and I think since everything is in the public square, we don't have like a private experience of thing anymore. I doubt that many people write a private diary anymore. I think like if you're writing, so well, if I'm writing, I might as well put it online, right? And so I like a lot of private experiences now become public. I mean, this is kind of playing into the theme of the book of the most intimate detail of your life becoming grist for the algorithm and how that changes us. And one of the reasons it changes, if every single part of ourselves is public, then, and of course, if it's public, it can be judged. Then you have this absolute paralyzing anxiety of, well, I hope everybody thinks I'm good. And then that just leads to bad writing or timid writing. And I heard people say like, oh, this character seems like an asshole. He seems unlikable. It's like, are you sure you're not an asshole? Like, how likable are you? You're not that likable. I can tell from your review. So, like I don't mind. The thing is, I don't. Maybe I should care more about this kind of thing, but I don't. And the fact that I was able to get this book published. I didn't think it would get published, but I do think that people are terrified of being wrong or being bad or being seen as wrong or bad because everybody knows deep down that they are wrong and bad. And nobody can get away from it. And you can do a public performance of being good and having all the correct opinions, but that you are. I mean, this is a very raised Catholic kind of thing happening here. But yeah, you know who you are. You know you're not that great.
And on the note of books not being for everybody, it's something that is an important part of the job that I'm doing, especially going into the holiday season of like trying to find the right book for the right people. There's one situation where somebody, I don't know if you've ever read Cherry by Nico Walker. It came out a few years ago. No. It was written in prison by Nico Walker, and it's like very autobiographical, but he couldn't write it about himself, but it's his story. And there was a person that walked out, and I'm like, I probably shouldn't have sold that person that book. I don't know that Dare to Know is that far away from not being for everybody that I'm going to be scared about receiving negative reviews or scarring the person for life. But it's there.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, what I learned is that I can only write what I can write, and you have to. And I mean, some people are really good at writing something that everybody will like, and those people deserve the success that they have. And some people are going to be the weirdos that have to follow their own star and take that wherever that takes them. And I'll be that person. That's fine. But the thing is, now I feel I'm making it sound like this book is only for one person, me. It's not. I think a lot of people will enjoy it. A lot of people have enjoyed it. But yeah, I think like having the expectations that it's a speculative thriller. It's weird. It's a flawed hero is a gift. It's a wonderful thing to look at the way that a person thinks who is not like you, and you would not want to be like them. But another great book is Lolita. Nobody wants to be Humbert, and he's very charming, and he's also a monster, and it's a great book. Even Ulysses, James Joyce, Leopold Bloom is no saint and does some things in that book that are awful and has these thoughts that are awful, and that's why we love it, because we want to be in there because we feel it ourselves. Unless we've become like these weird people who've totally externalized our internal lives and are slowly letting online life make us go insane.
Mm-hmm. On the note of imperfect people, I did promise going into this event that you and I would share a story that we both experienced in our life.
Yes.
And it was one of the reasons that I reached out to you when I finished reading the book. I found you on Twitter. And I'm like, James, I love the book. There's a scene in it that happened to me. And you said, this also happened to me. Where we were in... It was a girl that I was seeing shortly after college, intimate. And all of a sudden I'm like, what is all over my face?
Yeah.
And I looked down and there was just blood.
Yeah.
All over the girl's face. Very jarring
Yes.
experience,
Yes.
there is a scene that depicts that almost exactly from
The
the way I
nosebleed. Let's
experienced
make
it
it
in my
clear
life.
to the reader. It's a nosebleed. That's where
Yeah.
the blood is coming from. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm like, well, now I have to reach out to his mom. And then I did, and you said, we're brothers. This also happened.
Yeah. It was one of the most harrowing and weirdest experiences of my life. Um, and the person I was with, who shall go nameless, just laughed. She thought it was hilarious. We
Mhm.
broke up soon after, but
Yeah.
it was a very, very strange experience to have. It's like every single like high intensity experience all kind of intersecting at once. It is not. I don't recommend it to anyone. However, it makes great fiction. But that also set me off. It kind of, I found ways to kind of link it into what was going on in the story, so that and like have it recur later as a motif, so that it could happen in the story. There's one thing about like putting in the story and then justifying it in that scene, and
Mhm.
then you think like, well, how can I make that echo back and forth through the narrative, such that like, oh, this reminds me of that, and I never would have expected he would have gone there with that or made that connection in the plot later on. Um, and so, yeah, it's a harrowing and memorable.
Yes. Um, we're coming up on our hour. If anyone does have any questions, feel free to throw them in the comment section. We'll put those in. Do you have any other book recommendations? We've gone through quite a few different authors and books, but I'm
Yeah,
definitely going to bring in that Cahokia book.
I love the science fiction of Cixin Liu.
Okay.
The Three Body Problem and The Dark Forest and Death's End. It's a trilogy. I think they're making it to like an HBO series now. He It feels to me like it's a science fiction series. It kind of starts in like the Cultural Revolution in China in the 60s, and it kind of, the end of it is like trillions of years later at the end of the universe, and it's got such great scope of like time and space in it. And I kind of don't even want to speak about what it's about, because
Mhm.
it's about so many things, but it's one of those things that's like just a new idea every couple pages, like new ingenious ideas. Very clear writing. The characters don't get in the way of these big ideas. He's not like a literary writer. He's like feels like Arthur C. Clarke or Isaac Asimov. It's the ideas that matter. And I think he kind of laps patient. Like this for me is the science fiction epic right now. I think it's called Remembrance of Worlds Past, or that is the name of the series. But like the Three Body Problem is the first book, and that's what will get you going. And if you like that, the second book is even better, and the third book is incredible, and it has a scene at the end, towards the end, which is like will stay with me for the rest of my life. Like really amazing writing. So Cixin Liu, it's Cixinliu.
I actually have a customer that is reading through this series now. They're in the first book, so I will
Uh huh.
have to make sure to keep the other ones in stock.
It feels like something that would be good to have like a read group for. Like I've been like asking my friends to read it, so just so I could talk about it with them,
Yeah.
because there's just so much to talk about. Um, yeah, so I really admire him as a writer. Ted Chiang, both of his books of short stories, I really enjoy. Um, let's see. That's what I've got off the top of my head. I, I there is a writer who's not as well known as Jack Gems,
Okay.
Jac, and their last name is, so it's a woman, Jemc, uh, and she writes kind of creepy uh, short stories and a novel. The novel is called The Grip of It, and the short story book is called False Bingo. She has some books before that, but I think these are the two big books that I read recently and I really enjoyed.
I will check them out.
that
Is there
that have
anything
like
else?
a similar kind of like Lynchian or unsettling or kind of like what's really going on feeling to them.
Cool. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we close up tonight?
Yes, if people have kids, uh, please consider doing something for the 92nd Newberry Film Festival. The due date is January 14th. If you go to 90newberry.com, it's 90 Newberry, it's Newbery.com. You can find out all the details. Adult help is okay. And yeah, it's a lot of fun to do. Like I just made a movie with my girls for this year's film festival. We did the Holly Black 2014 Newbery Honor Book Doll Bones. You ever read that one?
Yeah.
It's kind of like a creepy Newbery or whatever. And we did it in the style of Stranger Things. So it gave us an example to like dress up as a Demogorgon as 11 and run around and film it. And yeah, it's especially this film festival is especially popular with like homeschoolers or like people with like kind of time on their hands or like after school groups. So yeah, the 90-second Newbery Film. And if you want to know more like my views on storytelling, the Secrets of Story podcast, and I guess pick up Matt's book, The Secrets of Story, although I disagree with half of that's in it. So, but it's still a really good read. Probably one of the best like books on like writing theory, not only for screenwriters but also for novelists, any kind of story writer. He has very counterintuitive advice. Matt likes nothing more than to say something that he thinks is true that will enrage everybody. So yeah, those are my recommendations. Matt Bird, Jack Gems, Xixin Liu, and Ted Chiang.
I will definitely check out the Newbery Festival. One of my other past lives was I was on the board and did different parts of the Buffalo International Film Festival. Went to school for film.
Oh, wow.
Now own a bookstore. But I've done, if you search me on YouTube, other than the store's YouTube page, there are some acting that I've done. Acting, we'll put in quotes, and some other projects that I worked on as the director of photography. So
I should have guessed this because your opening video is so snappy.
Thank you. So I might round up my kids, whether they like it or not, to participate in that.
Oh, they're the perfect age. Like my kids are just starting, I feel, to age out. They're not going to admit it, but I think one of the kids who did the movie with us, I think he was like checked out the whole time.
Okay.
And I'd always used him as a star before because he has this kind of like really good charisma, but I think that this time he was just like, I'm over this. The ages your kids are is perfect, and they don't have to be the people who are using Final Cut or whatever or holding the camera. You could they could just have a script, have them be cute. If you go to 90secondnewbery.com, you can find a lot of examples of the best of. If you click on best of, you can find out a lot of really good movies. And we'll be doing the screening in Brooklyn on February 12th. Speaking of New York State, and in how far is Rochester, New York from Chautauqua?
I'm originally from Buffalo, and it was about an hour and a half from there, so it's probably like 2.5 hours from here.
Okay, so we're doing a screening there sometime in March.
Okay.
So you make a movie. I know a guy. I'll get your movie in, and you guys can make a day of coming to Rochester. You'll love it. And go to your old stomping grounds in Buffalo.
Perfect.
It's a lot of fun. Like hundreds of people come to these screenings, or pandemic permitting. Like we had to do it all online last year, but especially in Rochester. Rochester is a huge town for the 92nd Newbery. So yeah, I would love to see what you make. In fact, it's overdetermined. Now you kind of have to make something.
Okay. No pressure. Like we're heading into the busiest season of the year.
Exactly. I'm so demanding.
Well, thank you so much for your time. There was something else I was going to say, but it's gone now, so I will follow up with you if I remember, if it seems relevant enough. So pick up the book, Dare to Know by James Kennedy.
Dare to Know?
A lot of TikTok videos and mystery boxes that we've sent around the country, and this went into a lot of mystery boxes. So if they read it, enjoyed it, I hope they did. So we have this in store. Thank you for sending out the signed book plates. So we will have signed book plate copies in store that are still available. If you're not in the area, you can go to obpbooks.com and order it through there. Tomorrow is going to be our last event, and it's a bathroom book for people not pooping or peeing, but using the bathroom as an escape, by Joe Pera and illustrated by Joe Bennett. Joe Pera is actually originally from Buffalo. He is a comedian in New York City. He's been on Seth Meyers, Colbert, Conan. He has a show on Adult Swim called Joe Pera Talks to You. You can find on YouTube, Joe Pera Talks You to Sleep. He's a guy probably around my age that dresses like an old man like I do, talks very slowly like I tend to do. So I've connected with him. but he reminds me of like Andy Kaufman level of weirdness. He is just, I am assuming that he's in a character, but I have
Uh-huh.
never seen him not in that character. This is the only time that we, because we're doing it as a multi-store event directly with the publisher. And they did require that you purchase the book to get admittance into the event. So you can still do that. You can order the book through us. You can pick up. Actually, we're sold out of the book. This is my copy. If you really, really want it, I will sell you my copy. I have more coming in. But place an order, let us know, and we'll shoot you the link to that event. And stay tuned for the events that we have for next year. We're working on planning those out. James, thank you for ending out our year for our virtual events that I was running.
Thank you.
This was great. I had a lot of fun.
Oh my God, I did too. Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
And thanks for everyone for watching tonight. Take care.
Bye.